I moved a garden shed last year and I posted a video of the actual trip. What I didn't do is include details on how I prepared the shed to be moved, so I made this slideshow to show you the mechanism I used to move it. This is the shed. It's an 8 by 12 and I wanted to move it about 100 feet to the west of its current location. I looked for an axle wide enough to accommodate that 8-foot span, and they were tough to find. I looked through Craigslist. I couldn't find anything, and even the ones I was finding were pretty expensive for a one-time move. So instead, I decided to use parts from my own utility trailer. My plan was to make the shed work just like a trailer with an axle and wheels underneath and a tongue in front. This is the starting point. It's a homemade utility trailer. The spindle assemblies were sourced from a Pontiac 6000. My idea was to get a 10-foot long 6x6 and mount these spindle assemblies to it, forming a 10-foot wide axle. Here's a closer picture of that tongue. All I need to do is unbolt that and it drops right out. The spindle is bolted to a steel plate on the axle beam. I took the spindles off using a Torx bit and my impact wrench. Here's what the spindle looks like removed from the axle beam. Notice the protrusion off the backside with what looks like a bearing cap. The 6x6 axle had to be chiseled out a bit to make clearance for the backside of that spindle plate. Then I used lag bolts to secure the spindle to the 6x6. Here's the tongue removed from the trailer. I sandwiched the tongue between two 8-foot long 2x6s, and I did this so I'd have a longer tongue and I'd have material to attach it to the shed. I'll be using those two holes on the right side to secure it to the 2x6s. I started by jacking up all 4 corners and bracing them on blocks. The shed has 3 4x4s that run the full length, 2 on each side and 1 down the center, and those provide support to the shed. Next, I attached the tongue to the center 4x4. You can see I located the steel trailer tongue at the lowest point of the 2x6s so I could slip the whole thing up over the center 4x4 underneath the shed. I added an extra bolt through the front of those 2x6s to squeeze the wood tight to the steel tongue. As the weight of the shed comes down on the tongue, that bolt also supports the front. There's 2 bolts running through the 2x6s and the steel tongue. The entire wood tongue assembly is secured to the center 4x4 with strong construction screws. Here's a picture from the back. What I did is slid that entire axle assembly underneath the shed without the wheels attached, so I wouldn't have to jack it up quite so high. And once I had it slid under there, I was able to jack it up and add the wheels. Not sure what the shed weighs, but you could see that the weight of the shed doesn't look like it has putting any strain on the wheels at all. Might have been overkill, but I also added vertical blocks to either side of this axle. The shed was a bit on the downhill side on one side, and I wanted to prevent it from sliding to one edge or the other. Now that the tongue's attached, the axle's underneath it, blocks are out of the way, we're ready to go. I used my Polaris Ranger to pull the shed. It had plenty of power and great control. I'll be adding more slideshows to show the shed going on its new foundation and the mods we made once it was there. I'll put a link in the description to the video of the move. You'll see that the trailering setup worked great and the move couldn't have gone any smoother.